Hi BookTube, it's Amy, and as I promised in my Friday Reads, I am here to start my series on Proust's In Search of Lost Time. Now, I won't be talking about Volume 1 here because I've already read Volume 1. A little over a year ago, I read my way through Swan's Way. It was a library copy at the time, but as you can see up here, I purchased myself a copy of Volume 1 in the edition that I read. I am reading the C.K. Scott, Moncrief, and Terence Kilmartin translation. It is revised by D.J. Onrait. So this is what I'm reading here. There are a couple of different translations. This is the one that I've stumbled across, Modern Library Classics editions, and I find the translation quite easy to get into, and I do like the feel of these paperbacks. So this is what I'm going to be reading as I work my way through these. So I'm about 175 pages in to Within a Budding Grove. I started it yesterday, reading on my lunch break at work, and I read a little bit this morning with a cup of tea before I went off to the theater and saw Captain Marvel, which was highly entertaining. I'd recommend seeing that. And then I headed off to a pub and had a bite to eat, a couple of beers, and read some more before going to a coffee shop where I had a croissant and a cup of coffee and continued to read on. But also in there, I did stop off at Black Squirrel Books here in Ottawa, just out of curiosity to see if they still had this 2-volume biography set for $20 that I had noticed there a couple months back. I think these had been on the shelf for almost a year there and no one had bought them. And since I am diving into Proust, I thought, what better way to dive in even deeper than to pick up a biography. So these are by George D. Painter, or Panter. It's hard to say how that's pronounced here, but I'm not familiar with these apart from the fact that I saw them on the shelf. First published in 1959. This is a 1965 printing here. Can't tell you much about the author at all, other than the fact that it is a biography and someone took the trouble to underline in here and write down some notes, which I'm sure will be interesting for me as I read. So these should be interesting to jump into. If you're familiar with this biography set, let me know if you like it, or on the other hand, if you have a biography of Proust that you like better, be sure to let me know about that one in the comments, and I might have to check that out as well. So I got these, and as I was going for those, I saw this, which is a collection of essays about Proust. It was $9 here, and I thought, I'll grab that as well. It's got this beautiful end paper in here, and I did start reading this on the bus ride home. But it is a 1971 collection of essays by various authors expressing their thoughts on Proust and his life. And there's some excellent illustrations in here, which is what drew me to this edition. And I'm interested to get to an essay in here on Bergotte, which this essay is by Elizabeth Bowen, but there is an essay in here on Proust's discussion of Bergotte in the novels. And he does talk about Bergotte within A Budding Grove. In fact, I just got to the part where our protagonist is meeting Bergotte for the first time. Bergotte is a contemporary of the protagonist, a French author who is considered by our protagonist to be kind of a master, a literary master, a great writer, but in previous scenes we have seen Bergotte kind of undressed in the protagonist's eyes by a guest in his parents' home, a diplomat who says, "Oh, I've met Bergotte and I don't really like him. I was trying to avoid meeting him in society, but I had to because of my position." He thinks Bergotte's writing is trash and criticizes the protagonist's own piece of writing, saying that he's trying to imitate this kind of trashy writer. And all of a sudden, our protagonist is coming face to face with this revered author that he's kind of built up this image in his mind of who this author is. He's coming face to face with him at this dinner party at the home of the Swans, who he has begun to get into society with. They've kind of taken him under their wing, so to speak. Just making sure I can talk here. That feels better on my throat. So they've taken him into their home and under their wing, so to speak. Madame Swan invites him for dinners, invites him on outings because he is a playmate, a friend of their daughter, Gilbert. I'm not sure how her name would be pronounced. It could be Gilbert, but because there's an E after the T, it leads me to think that the T should be pronounced. But anyway, he is, it's kind of odd because the novel describes him as her playmate, but I think by this point, they're around the age of 15, so they're not really playmates anymore, but they have become friends, and she has been inviting him over to her teas and her gatherings that happen on the same day as Madame Swan's at-home day, and so he has sort of been taken into the Swans' home, and they begin to include him in things like trips to the zoo and dinner parties with their other friends, and through these interactions he comes face to face with this author. And at this point, I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. It could be highly disenchanting for him, especially given an earlier interaction at the beginning of this volume when he was highly infatuated with an actress by the name of Burma, and he had heard great things about her. He had built up the way that seeing her perform, seeing her art, would or should make him feel. And of course, when he finally gets to go see her, he is severely let down because his expectations are not met by reality. And so there is a concern here as I'm reading that he is going to experience very much the same thing in meeting this author, Bergotte. Returning to my thoughts on his meeting of Burma, well, his seeing of Burma, he doesn't meet Burma, but in seeing Burma at the theater, I find it very interesting, very, very refreshing to read about, because I think that's something that many of us can relate to, this idea, especially when we're young, of creating an image in our mind of how great art or a great play, a great novel, perhaps even great music, or seeing our favorite pop artist in concert should make us feel, and we build it up so much that we almost know, as the protagonist seems to know before he even goes to this play to see Burma. He contemplates backing out, but then makes the decision to go. Even though it's something he greatly wants, he also doesn't want it. We almost know that we built it up to be too much, and we go in knowing we're going to be disappointed, but at the same time feeling as though we shouldn't. I guess I would say in part I felt this way, not to the same degree as our protagonist here, but the first time I finally got to go to an opera, I had built it up in my mind as this wonderful experience, and of course it was a very enjoyable experience, but it wasn't quite everything I hoped it would be. It didn't make me feel entirely the way that I thought it was going to make me feel. And I think similarly to the protagonist in Within a Buddy Grove, I tried to compensate for the disappointment I felt. Not that I would call it entirely disappointment, because I did still very much enjoy the experience, but I had to reconcile what I expected and what I experienced in a way that I guess fed my ego and my idea of what an opera, what art should be in order to sustain that image in my mind. And our protagonist is dealing with that as well when he sees Burma. He keeps straining and straining and straining, kind of leaning over the rail. You get the sense that he is pretty far away from the stage. He can just barely see her. At first he's not sure like which actress is her. And he comes out just disappointed, like, was that it? Is this all that she is? Where is the actress, the experience that I had built up in my mind? And he absorbs the reactions of people around him to try to reconcile this experience, and builds up what he didn't experience into something that he can say, you know, maybe I missed something, maybe it was great art after all. But it was just interesting to read about this, you know, this very complex experience of interacting with art, with something that's not what you expected it to be. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well right here, but I found that quite interesting to read about. What I love about Proust's writing is not only do we get those scenes that make us think about what it was to be young, what it was to kind of challenge our expectations and assumptions, but we also get passages that kind of make us laugh just because they're quite humorous. His kind of observations that he's making about people, about relationships, about social interactions. And as I'm reading, I'm kind of underlining things that might make me chuckle a bit, things that make me think and make me reflect on my own youth. I'm still quite young, so I still stumble a bit, challenging my expectations, challenging experiences. But here, for instance, on page 10, we have a husband and wife here, and he is our protagonist reflecting on his mother, and he says, she knew that she was carrying out that wifely duty which consisted in making life pleasant and comfortable for her husband, just as when she saw to it that his dinner was perfectly cooked and served in silence. That wifely duty that he's referring to is his mother's reinforcement in her husband's, in his father's mind, of the good opinion that he already has of people. So he describes his mother as kind of going out of her way, regardless of what she thinks, to reinforce the thoughts and good opinions of other people that her husband has. And she thinks of this, you know, that Mr. Norpos, you know, he's a great guy, you like him. She goes about doing that in the same way that she would make him a nice dinner, seeing that as part of her wifely duty to keep him comfortable, to reinforce his thoughts and opinions, which I think is quite humorous to read about. So that's where I'm at with Within a Budding Grove so far. Maybe not very coherent thoughts at this point, but I thought I would take a moment to pause and to check in before I read on.